Hello and welcome back to CinemaBurger's 13 Nights of Halloween as we start our final review, the Robert Zemeckis remake of Roald Dahl's The Witches. It stars Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer, featuring narration from Chris Rock. It's the same story as the book and movie with Angelica Houston, but with certain changes. Now, first of all, Chris Rock is the narrator and presumably the kid as an adult. Now he narrates the beginning and all about witches, how they hate children and wanted to destroy them. And while they show the kid, it relies more on Chris Rock's narrating than letting the kid himself act. The kid in the original movie was a decent actor and was given more freedom. Now the kid's parents die in a car crash just like the original, but this time it's a little more believable since the kid lives in Chicago, so the parents crash in a snowstorm and the parents weren't wearing seatbelts apparently, so they die, which is more believable because it's a little more ominous when the kid's parents die in the original movie from the 90s. Now, on its own, also, the new movie uses more CG instead of practical effects. Now, it's a little distracting at times, but they save all of the good CG for Anne Hathaway, who plays the Grand Witch. Now, they have her face have like slits in it that look like scars. She looks like the Joker, basically, which is funny because she was in The Dark Knight. So she could be like, you know how I got these scars? Eating children. No. But, she also looks like Melina from Mortal Kombat. But they save all the good CG for her, and the rest of it's kind of meh. Now, Octavia Spencer plays the grandma, and she is described as like kind of like a voodoo healer. She's not really a smoker like in the other movie, and she's a little more involved in this movie than the other grandmother. Now, they explain how the grandma had a friend who was uh, put inside a painting in the original movie, and this time the grandma had a friend who was turned into a chicken. Now, they use CG, of course, to turn the kid into a chicken, but once it's a chicken completely, it's still CG. They could have used a real chicken, but instead they use CG, and it's really noticeable. It's more believable when there's an actual person or animal on screen instead of CG effects. Now, throughout the beginning of the movie, there's a witch following the grandma and the kid around, kind of making the grandma sick. It's not because of smoking. Now, the grandma gets kind of sick and she has to go on a better diet. Now, when the grandma's explaining about witches and the Grand High Witch, you do see Anne Hathaway earlier in the movie, and you see her like CG mouth. So she gets revealed earlier than Angelica Houston did in the previous movie. So since the witches are starting to chase the grandma and the kid, they go to this hotel to hide out. Now, the hotel manager is played by Stanley Tucci, and his character isn't very interesting. Rowan Atkinson did a better job in the original movie. I hate to keep comparing the two, but, and of course this was a book as well, but you have to compare it since it's the same story. And it's not trying to be its own thing. I mean, it kind of is, but this one I think is slightly closer to the book. Now we meet Bruno as well, and he's the same character. He's obsessed with chocolate and food. Now when we get to the big witch reveal and plan scene, Anne Hathaway is basically doing an Angelica Houston impression, but they make Anne Hathaway able to fly. She doesn't have more prosthetics than the other witches, but she has like a tail. She has like the three fingers, because they explain that witches are actually demons, which is a little interesting. Now, this would have been a good situation to have transgender actors or people in the scene become a more varied look of people, at least. Now, since the grandma's still kind of feeling sick, the kid gets her breakfast and orders room service. He orders chicken fried steak, sticky buns, cornbread, eggs, and grits. And I'm thinking, like, your grandma's not feeling good already, and she's not overweight, but you trying to kill her or something? Like, order something a little healthier. But it is the South, I guess, because it takes place in Alabama instead of England. Now, of course, the Grand Witch still has the same plan to send all the witches around the world to buy candy stores to turn children into mice. Now, of course, they first turn Bruno into a mouse, but when they turn the main kid into a witch, it is pretty scary. They lay him down on the ground, they're restraining him, they pour the formula in his ear, and he turns, and it's actually pretty, like, horrifying. Like, this would scare a younger child, and I applaud that they took that chance. Because up until now, the movie's been pretty tame. Now, another thing is, the grandma gets the kid a pet mouse, and it turns out that this mouse was also a kid at one time, which adds a little different dynamic, because there's 3 people that are turned into mice to try to stop the witches this time. And the grandma has a bigger role in trying to help with that. Now, by the end, instead of turning the Grand Witch into a mouse during the soup eating scene, she had stopped eating because she got distracted, so the grandma goes to the Grand Witch's room to try to steal the formula. And the kids turned as mice tried to stop the witch. Now, since there's apparently mice in the hotel because the kids are getting turned to mice, the hotel manager sets mouse traps. He has an exterminator do that. So the kids collect mouse traps. They put the formula on it and kind of like launch the formula at the witch and get it down her throat, which is pretty clever. Like having the mice fight back more so. And of course, the Grand Witch gets turned into a grotesque looking mouse. They get chased around by the mouse traps, and then the grandma catches the Grand Witch. Now, in the beginning, the Grand Witch has this cat that really serves no purpose, except at the end to eat the Grand Witch, who is now a mouse. So that really was a long-running plot point that just was for a payoff at the end. It didn't serve any other purpose. Now, Anne Hathaway is having fun as this character. I mean, she has a CG mouth, but she's hamming it up a bit. She's definitely doing an Angelica Houston impression, I think. But I don't think she really tries to make it her own. I think she could have. Now, by the end, Chris Rock is narrating again, and they talk about how Bruno's parents wouldn't accept him as a mouse, so he goes to live with the girl mouse and the main kid. So basically, Bruno's parents abandoned him. Now, I don't like that. That's kind of cruel. Like, I know your kid's a mouse, but it's still your kid. And they do something at the end which I didn't expect. They don't actually get turned back into humans. The kids and the grandma go all over the world and stop the witches and turn them into mice with the formula. And they're teaching kids how to do this. And the mouse, who is now voiced by Chris Rock visually, who looks a bit older, are going to fight witches, which I like that ending a lot. It is different, and it leads, I guess, could lead to a sequel if they ever make another one. I doubt they will. But overall, it's still the same movie as the original and the book. It does change things up a little bit with the different ending. Anne Hathaway is having some fun, but she's still doing an Angelica Houston impression. The kid actor himself isn't great, and they rely too much on Chris Rock's narrating to move the story along rather than the kid, because the kid in the original movie was a lot better actor. Also, I miss the practical effects of the original movie. They rely too much on CG in this movie. Overall, I'd give it 2.5 burgers. It didn't need to be remade, I guess. I mean, no movie really does. But they didn't do too much different with it. It is worth a watch, though. It's on HBO Max. It's an original. And so, yeah, that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the CinemaBurger's 13 Nights of Halloween. I'm Scott Berger, and I'll see you next month with more movie reviews.